everyone. So today we will discuss in continuation with last class. So last class we have seen introduction to neural coding problem, encoding and decoding models, and maximum likelihood estimation and few other techniques and details of it. So I will just recap them and then we will, since there are very few people, we will just jump into dynamical systems and latent variable views and then come back to decoding. So we'll get started. So from yesterday we have seen what are encoding models. That is, we are trying to map a relation between the neural activity, depends on any kind of recording, whether it is electrophysiology recording or EEG or ECOG or MRI, etc. And we are mapping between like what features of stimulus are correlated with the neural activity here. These are encoding models, and basically the framework we use is this kind of a notation where we are trying to find the best distribution that can describe the spikes or neural activity or EEG activity given the stimuli or task parameters, like something in the visual world, some edge in the image, or moving left versus right, etc. Okay. So what we do in general is we have to replace this brain with a model that can map between stimuli and neural activity, and we have to find a, so every model has a parameter. So we are trying to learn the parameter theta here, which describes the model. So we can replace this brain with the model here and then learn the mapping. So the idea is to find the best theta here, which can fit both the stimuli and the neural activity. So one of the main method for this is maximum likelihood estimation. So we have seen intuition behind it. So let's say we have a conditional distribution like this, which can be viewed in a two-dimensional plane like this. So you have x variable, let's say some stimulus parameter called contrast here, and on y-axis you see the spike count, the neural response. So you're trying to see how the distribution is. Now let's say you performed some experiments and you got these data points, the red ones. You try to find theta for the distribution, for this two-dimensional distribution that can fit the data points well. So basically when you tune this theta parameter, it can change this white light kind of thing in this two-dimensional plane. So let's say you have a knob for controlling this and you try to rotate, and you stop when it fits when it properly fits the data here. So this is the intuition behind maximum likelihood. How we do is what we saw in the last lecture. So this is for one neuron, one trial. But what if there are multiple trials and multiple points you have, or yeah. So in order to fit for them, what you have to do is, like, let's say you have some data. You have y, all the spike counts, and x, capital X, showing all the set of stimuli that you presented for the participants or an animal. And now you have to find theta that maximizes this distribution. So now it's kind of multivariable distribution, not just two one-dimensional variables y and x, because you have multiple trials. So one assumption here we make is the trials are independent between each other, and therefore we can take a product over each trial of the same distribution p of yi given xi. So here I represents the trial. So once you get this, you assume some probability distribution for the neural responses and take a log likelihood of it and try to maximize, find the theta which maximizes this p of y given x comma theta. So this is the formulation for maximum likelihood. For example, if you take the distribution as a Gaussian here, which is a linear function of stimuli contrast, and the factor that we are multiplying here is the theta. So this is a parameter we have to find the theta which fits the which is best for this mapping between y and x. So what we do is we take a log likelihood for mathematical convenience, so that we can convert this products to sum, and then differentiate this equation and equate to 0 to get the maximum value. So this summarizes the general linear model where the input contrast, the stimulus parameter, is linearly mapped using this theta variable, and then you add a noise here. In this case, if you take Gaussian, you can add Gaussian, or usually for neural responses we use Poisson distribution. So we can use a Poisson distribution or Poisson noise here to get the spike counts here. So this summarizes the general linear model that we saw last time. It's just recapping all the things that we learned. But what if the distribution of data is not nice linear like this? So it is something of this sort, and when you see this, you can easily find it is some exponential function. So in this case, what we do is we take this linear mapping and pass it through another nonlinear function, and that becomes the mean firing rate, and this mean firing rate parameter we pass it to the Poisson distribution to generate the neurons firing data, okay, or get the mapping between stimuli and data. So this can be described by this kind of a model where you have stimulus and all the relevant features for that particular neuron or population of neurons you multiply by this filter, same as this linear thing. You multiply with this nonlinear function, then pass it to nonlinear function and then Poisson distribution to get the firing rate. So basically this kind of a model is generally used to model neural responses to a given stimuli or a behavioral parameter. So, and this gives us an intuition of generalized linear model where instead of just passing it through linear and then then passing through noise layer, you pass it through linear and then pass it through a nonlinear function in order to fit the data properly, so that you can explain all the nonlinearities in the system. Okay, so this is what we saw. Any doubts from this last class or whatever I recapped now? Okay, fine. Since it was a recap, I went a little fast. If you have any doubts, please email or write to us. Then we saw how we can see generalized linear model in action. Let's say you have some stimulus parameter which is varying this way as shown in this blue curve, and then you have the spike responses from a neuron that you're recording. So what you do is you take a window of this, and at that end point you see what happened in the neuron, and do a time lag version of each window that way, and you get a uh, formulation of this sort. So on this side, on Y, you have the spikes. Whenever the spike occurred, you write 1, and wherever it doesn't occur, you write 0. On the right hand side, you have something called design matrix. So this design matrix is very crucial, and depending on this, your mapping might change entirely. So in this case, what we're using is a particular window length of this stimulus waveform, and then you have this regressors k. So now you need to find the best k that can map between y and x. So that can be done via maximum likelihood estimation, which is also in the case of matrices, it will be the least squares, orthogonal least squares. So this is the best solution that can map between y and x. Okay. So it is same as maximum likelihood. If you put in the probability formulation, you get maximum likelihood estimation. If you put in matrix format, you get this. And we have seen if this covariance is identity matrix, the spike triggered average is nothing but averaging all the windows where the neuron spiked. So then you get an average waveform, and then you can tell that this particular neuron is representing this kind of a feature of the stimulus. So this is one way to find like what stimulus feature is important for a given neuron or given neuron population, and this is also basis for how to find a receptive field of a neuron. Okay. Then we just started with decoding models. These are the reverse of encoding models. That is, your brain has some neural responses, and you record via any paradigm, and you have the neural activity. Now, given the neural activity, you have to predict what the behavior parameter is, or what stimuli feature that subject is seeing, or what decision the participant is going to make. So in this case, we can use a similar formulation, just that the x and y variables can be reversed from previously what we saw. So previously we saw y was the neural data and x was the stimuli. Now we can reverse it and use the same formulation of maximum likelihood estimation to do this. So this is the first level of or simplest and interpretable level that we are talking about of this maximum likelihood estimation. So we'll not get into different decoding methods. There are many Bayesian decoding and many machine learning methods to decode. So this we'll see maybe in later classes because we have fewer audience. We'll just jump into a new thing here. So this is called latent variable models. So okay, before that, just to give okay, fine, yeah. So I went too fast. If any doubts from the previous recap here or any comments? Okay, fine. So we are coming into one of the state of art methods in neuroscience, where to understand the brain mechanisms. So nowadays this is very common among neuroscience community. So there are many methods, many deep learning methods coming up later, but I will explain in simple terms or intuition behind it so that it will be easy when you see later. So right now we discussed, like, we show a stimulus, you get a response, you record, and then relating or trying to map between the stimuli and the neural responses. But what if there is no stimuli? Let's say a person is resting or doing some random activity. There is no particular trial structure, or even if there is behavior. So whatever you're seeing here is only the observation. It's not exactly how the a population of neurons are interacting, or what exactly is happening in the brain. So the idea here is there is some hidden activity going on in the brain which is resulting to this neural recordings. It can be any recording. So the idea is to find this variable, the hidden variable, some structured way of neural population activities resulting in this particular recording waveform. So the formulation goes here, like you have given some underlying activity, some hidden activity x, you get the neural responses y, and this hidden activity is what you're interested in. Assumption here is the hidden activity is more structured, which gives rise to this particular recording. It can be at every time point, or it can be the whole dynamics of it. So it can be how the variable is changing over time and then resulting this particular recording. So there it gives a conditional distribution over past time point xt minus 1 as shown here. So basically we are interested in this distributions or this data, how the x varies or what are the dynamics, how with time how it changes the x. So the best intuition that I can give right now is, let's say there is a concert going on, some orchestra, and the audience only listen to the music that is coming from the orchestra. But or for example, you're watching some movie, and in the background music there is an orchestra going on, but we only listen to the music. So the music is like a neural recording, and the people playing different instruments, and this all instruments and people playing them are the neurons. So here the underlying structure is the conductor. So the conductor instructs. So let's say there are two conductors who are instructing different set of people in that music and giving rise to the background music in a movie. So here it becomes the movement or the instructions of this conductors becomes the latent variables. So these are hidden from the audience and you're only listening to the music. So now this x variable is nothing but the conductor's instructions, which are latent to the audience, or similar analogy goes with the neuron. So now we are interested in what are the instructions this conductor is giving. Okay. So is the intuition clear behind latent variable models? Any doubts if you don't understand this? Okay. So hope everyone understood. Okay, great. So assumption is, for every neural activity that you record, it's very complex. Like just by seeing the data, you can't say anything. But uh, there should be some structure resulting in behavior. So that assumption gives rise to this concept called latent variables, where some hidden state which is very structured is resulting in this neural activity that you're recording, but this structure is also giving rise to the behavior. So we'll see some examples where this latent variables are very informative and very rich to know how the link between brain and behavior. Okay, so here is just an illustration. Let's say you have three neurons here, R1, R2, R3, and each neuron has certain spiking, waveform. So neuron 1 spikes like this as the time progresses. Now for, for giving like for neuron to respond this way, there is some underlying dynamics. So let's say those are represented, which are usually low dimensional. There are only two, like what we saw, there are only three instruments and two conductors. They are giving the instructions, and if you do some linear mapping, you get this. So this is basically a kind of linear dimensional reduction. Just by using some weights, you can get back the neural data. So we are interested in this latent variable, some latent variables. So usually when you record neurons and let's say R1, R2, R3 are the three axes here as shown here, okay? R1, R2 and R3. And you plot at each time point how this each neuron is responding, which results in one point in the three-dimensional plane. Now in the three-dimensional coordinate system, okay? But usually the neural this dynamics, all this interaction between these three neurons is having some structure. Therefore it usually lies in a low dimensional plane as shown here, S1, S2. So these are the latent variables, and the whole structure is restricted to only this subspace, and this is what giving rise to this complex neural activity. So that's the idea here. And once you have latent variables, you can use the similar weights to get back the neural responses as well. So or either way, you get the neural responses, map it, and you get the latent variables. So these latent variables have a very specific or informative structure to them, which is resulting in the behavior. So that's the idea. So any questions still here? Okay, I hope everyone understood. So usually the intuition here is the neural population activity is very complex and high dimensional, but the structure resulting in this particular neural activity is low dimensional and simple. So we are interested in those hidden states or those latent variables which have a very simple and informative structure. And the entire aim of this part is to find this plane or this dynamics in the two-dimensional plane, or how S1 and S2 vary, and how informative are the S1 S2 dynamics for the behavior. Okay, so another way to see this is, so this is a linear dynamical system framework. So I have shown a very simple case, but other cases you have some inputs. Let's say the stimuli comes in a sequence, u1, u2, u3, and there are some latents, some x latents, which corresponding to each input they have x1, x2, x3, and these are the observations. So input some internal dynamics results in the observation data, and this is has a time progresses along the horizontal axis. As the time progresses, how the latents change, how the inputs change, what are you recording, and these are all related. Now we have access through to only this and the inputs, but we are interested in how the latents change, and these latents are usually low dimensional and simple. So how to represent this whole system is, you can represent it in a linear dynamical systems equation. So how this goes, there are two equations for this. Let's first take observation equation. So some latence, some transformation of latence plus some noise to that is resulting in the measurements that you're seeing here, okay, YT, the neural spikings or EEG data or etc. And inherently this X, the latent variables have their own dynamics. So the inherent dynamics is related by the matrix A. So some previous time point is transformed and is informative of current time point of the same latent variable, and there are also inputs that you're giving, the stimuli that you're presenting to the uh, participant, and there is a noise term. Noise is always there in the latent dynamics or internal dynamics as well as the observations. So therefore you add this noise. So using this formulation, similar to how we found the theta parameter using maximum likelihood estimation, our parameters are A, B and C. Okay, so basically the aim of this is to find A, B and C. We will not deal with the real-time problem where we find A, B and C. This is just an introduction to this, and we'll see how we can use this in the later classes. So is everyone clear with latent dynamical systems model here? Or to be more clear, if anyone is uh, acquainted with differential equations, it's like with time how the latent variable changes is a function of current latent variable state and the input that the system takes in. And if you're approximating this function as a linear function, you just have to multiply with two matrices, that is A and B here. So B times the input and A times the latent variable of current latent variable gives rise to some kind of latent dynamics. So this can also be used for describing latent dynamical systems model. So we have seen latent variable model and latent dynamics. So usually it's always, the latents are always dynamic, and the trajectory of those latents give rise to certain neural responses which link to the behavior. Okay, is everything clear until now, or the concept of latent variables and how we can represent them in a linear systems fashion? Yes, I'm going to give the examples from a few papers which will make it more clear. Okay. So, for example, some are informative of different cognitive phenomenon. Like, for example, you're making a motor reaching task. So, the latent, there is the preparatory activity. So, for a particular motion action, there is a preparatory activity underlying. So, that preparatory activity is giving rise to the recordings that you get from motor cortex and the behavior that your motor cortex executes. So, let's say left and right directions. So you can see those latents clearly going from one point to the right, one point to the left, which are informative of uh, the motor preparation itself. And these latents are constructed during the preparation, not when executing the movement. So using the preparatory activity itself during the preparatory phase, you can decode which movement they are going to do or execute in the next immediate after the go cue or something. So we'll see that example here. So before getting there, to give the repeating how to construct this space. So there is a nice review paper called Computation Through Neural Population Dynamics from Krishna Shenoy's lab, and so what you see here is there are three neurons, and you bin the time, like you have multiple bins of different window sizes, and in each window each neuron gives a particular spikes. Here the neuron 1 spikes once in this yellow colored window, and neuron 2 spikes twice, and neuron 3 spikes 0 times. So this will give a one single point in this three-dimensional plane. And now as the time progresses, you keep moving these windows and you construct every point there. So you put every point there, and you know where the initial point was and how the trajectory went as the time progresses. Okay, this trajectory is called the neural trajectory, how the neural population activity is going. So now, based on different initial time points, you can get different flow fields. So how we compute this is next question. Let's say there is some method to compute this flow field. Let's say you have some approximation where you just take different initial points of the firing rates and then see how the neural field goes. So what this flow field says is, if I start at this point, my the neural trajectory goes this way. If I start at this point, my neural trajectory goes this way. Or if you have, it can be more complex. There can be more complex flow fields where if I start at this point, I go this way. But if the neuron firing starts at this point, it goes this way. So based on input, you can have different flow fields. So let's say this is one input where a monkey is moving downward. Then based on the starting state of the neuron, you will know which way it is going based on this preparatory activity flow field. Similarly for the upward movement. So this is an example. We'll get into the same example from. So here I'm showing a simple model where you just have 3 neurons, but in general it is not 3 neurons. It's like hundreds of neurons or thousands of neurons you are recording from. So it will be a 1000-dimensional space. So there constructing a linear, seeing the neural trajectories is very difficult. So there we make use of dimensionality reduction methods or deep learning or some method to reduce the 1000 or 100 neurons to 2 or 3 dimensions and see how then construct this latent dynamics. So not exactly the neural recordings, but you'll use a latence of it. So we'll get into the examples there. So in that case, what we do, for example, one technique that we use is a principal component analysis. So we haven't gone through principal component analysis, but for now you see like we'll get there just a few minutes. So you have some 10 neurons, so you have 10-dimensional space, and in the 10-dimensional space you construct each point based on how the as the time progresses, how the neuron responds. But from this neural recording itself, you can get a data matrix. It's nothing but just put the each neuron responses like 1 and 0 in this case, or if it is a continuous data, you just put, or some histogram, you construct some histogram and put those values here. So that gives a data matrix. Using this data matrix, you want to see a covariance matrix. So how variable are the neural responses between each pair of neurons that you select. Okay, between N1 and N2, how are they co-varying? How N9 and N10 are co-varying? Like that you can form pairs and get a covariance matrix. And from this covariance matrix, if you find eigenvalues which can, which are the most important dimensions to explain this data. So that is what essentially principal component analysis is doing. Right now you don't have to understand how principal component analysis is done. So we are finding the vectors which best explains the whole data covariance. So once you apply principal components, that is you try to find the eigenvectors of the covariance matrix and then project each of this point into each of this axis, which results in a 3-dimensional coordinate system. Now it is similar to what we saw previously. It's like this. Instead of using neural space, we are using a principal component space. So there are many techniques to use this dimensional reduction, and principal component analysis is one way. So once you get the principal components, so you have neural state space, which we discussed previously, and this the low dimensional subspace that we built is the space. Within this, you can have another subspace which has a particular structure to explain the neural data, structured way, the hidden variables here. So this is the main idea, and it's not just neural state space, it's the dimensionally reduced neural state space, and then you do this. Yeah, this is called latent neural state space, not just neural state space. So, is this part clear of why dimensional reduction is needed? Okay. So, yeah, so let's get into one example here. In general, for any task that a participant or animal performs, you have multiple trials. Let's focus on this figure A here. So these are multiple trials and multiple conditions on the axis coming outward of the plane. So you see this is the conditions axis. These are multiple trials. You have multiple trials, trial 1, trial 2, and so on, trial T. On each trial, you have different conditions and different conditions related neural activity here as shown in red, green, and blue. So now what we do is, let's say we average across trials, and for each condition you get one peristimulus time histogram. Basically, you're taking this, averaging, and constructing a histogram across time. So you select a window, you mark how many spikes are there, so on and so forth as a time progresses, and you get a peristimulus time histogram for each of this condition. So now this is another type of dimensional reduction where we are just using averages, just averaging across trials to get a three-dimensional plane across different conditions in the task. Okay, not using any complex method like principal components, etc. It's just averaging as a method for dimensionality reduction. So now you have three conditions, each axis explains one of the condition. The intuition is that. So usually like monkeys perform this cued motor action task or motor reaching task. So where so for example there is some maze kind of thing, and there is one initial fixation square here, and then a second square appears anywhere in this maze, and the monkey has to overcome the obstacles and reach to that point. And you can have multiple conditions like uh, how the configuration of the maze is, or which direction the monkey has to move. So based on that you can have multiple conditions, and in this case the recordings are from premotor area where planning happens, and they also have recordings from the motor area which executes the movement. So in this task, as soon as it comes, it has a time window to plan the movement, and whenever a go cue comes, some sound comes or some color of the screen changes, the monkey has to make a movement, and only then the monkeys are rewarded. Okay, so they are very well trained in this kind of a task, and when they are performing during the preparatory period, we can construct this figure as shown here, the B figure, and you get some different axes here. Let's say we are only interested in two conditions. So there are multiple conditions, two dimensions here: dynamical axis 1, dynamical axis 2. This shows all the reach trajectories of the monkey's hand movement. So mostly you can see the downward movement are clustered with green color, and upward movement with red color. So we just focused on these two conditions, and these are the neural dynamics constructed from this average responses after averaging across trials. So you start at a point and you want to see how the neural trajectory goes. So this trial average itself gives a very neat dynamical informative dynamics here. Okay, so basically it's like here it is saying that what you're recording from a neuron is not important, but a population of neurons responses are important here. Okay, so the population of neurons is 20 here, but you're getting three informative axes. So basically it explains this population activity explains the behavior, but whatever you're recording is more complex than what is undergoing. So this is one kind of a latent dynamics. Is this thing clear of how we got this? So it's just averaging. Instead of using principal component, deep learning or something, we're just averaging across trials. So we don't have to use this particular, it's just averaging, we can just call it as a normal thing, but it's just gives a initial point to understand this dynamics and how informative they are. So not just single neuron or one layer neuron activity is important, it's the population of neurons that gives rise to this behavior, and this whole population trajectories are informative than the recordings that you observe. So yeah. Okay, I hope this is clear. Any doubts? Can I see some thumbs up if you understood or if you didn't understand? Okay, so cool. So another example, we'll see into a decision making task here. Okay, so here the task goes this way. The monkey is fixated on the screen at the blue point here, and there are two types of cues. The yellow colored square here is called motion context cue, and the plus is called color context cue. What the monkey has to do is, there are two targets appearing showing in red or green color on either side of the screen, and then there is a moving dot stimuli, random, it's called random dot kinematogram, and then there is another delay period, and then monkey has to make a saccade to right or left based on uh, either the motion context or the color context, and how they make the saccade, we'll see that. So there is two parameters that are being manipulated. One is the color of the dots, one is the direction of motion. So the direction of motion can be more coherent, or like most of the dots can move to one side, either left or right, or the color context. So the density of color, basically it can be full green or full red, or in between half red and half green. So that is shown here. So this row has mostly green, this row has mostly red, and middle row has 50% or half and half kind of. So this defines different coherence levels in color. In motion context, it's the direction of dots moving, either left or right. So first, if you see the leftmost column here, all the dots move to the left, or all the dots move to the right, and intermediate coherence levels. Okay. So basically, if it is a color context, monkey has to make a saccade. Let's say if it is mostly green, monkey has to make a saccade to the left side. If it is a color context, it has to make a saccade based on the color of the dot, either to the left or to the right. If it is highly coherent with red dots, mostly red dots, then it has to make a saccade to the right. If it is a motion context, here the monkey the color is irrelevant here. Monkey has to follow which direction the motion is moving. So if the motion is to the leftward, it has to make a saccade to the left side, irrespective of the color. Okay. So is the task clear here? This task is important to see to understand the neural dynamics, so that's why I'm asking. So just to reiterate, there are two contexts. Based on the context, the monkey has to make a saccade. If it's a color context, if it is mostly red, the monkey has to make a saccade to the red dot. If it is a motion context, it has to make a saccade in the direction of motion that the monkey perceives. And there are different levels of coherence, either in motion or color. So as you can see here, so this is a motion context. In the motion context, choices to the green doesn't matter. Therefore, you don't see any proper psychometry in this figure, right? But here, since motion context, the motion of the dots matters, and as the motion increase more coherent toward the rightward responses should increase. So this shows that nice psychometric curve. Whereas on the other hand, if it is a color context, if you select all the trials only where the color is important, motion direction becomes irrelevant. Therefore, you don't see, like, for the choices to the right, you don't see any nice psychometric curve. But for color responses, for color coherence, as the coherence increase, the choices to the green also increase. As the green dots increase, the choices to the green also increase. So this is the monkey's behavior of how they perform in these two contexts. uh, are the psychometric curves clear here? And if you understand what is the relevant versus irrelevant here, that is sufficient. So any doubts in psychometric curve or behavior curves here? Okay, fine. I hope it is clear. We'll get into the neural dynamics here. So okay, there are too many things here. Let's zoom in. So basically, we use some method. It's called regression-based principal component analysis. You don't have to know about it. So just think that somehow you're extracting three axes. Uh, Wait, yeah, okay. Oh, if I zoom, it doesn't come. Okay, fine. Yeah. Yeah. So just focus on this figure, this one. Okay, there are three axes that the method gives rise to. One is choice axis that says in a given trial, what's the choice of the monkey, whether it's to the right or to the left. Okay. One is motion, irrespective of color or motion. It's just the choice. One is the motion axis, that says about the motion of the dot's direction. Okay, and then you have the color axis also. Okay, which is not shown, which is lying behind somewhere here. So we can get the color axis as well. So what you see here is this gray color shows the dynamics of this based on the coherence levels, how the monkey's choice are. So here you can clearly see when the motion is relevant in the motion context. You can see like based on the coherence, the amplitude of the trajectory is different. So this amplitude is close by, then increases, then increases. As the coherence increase, the uh, and across choice you can see leftward versus rightward choices. Okay, so in the motion context, this is all constructed by averaging the trials in the motion context, like what we saw previously. But instead of using neural responses here, we are using some principal components which are informative of the task. Okay, so here is just rotating to show the color axis. So when the color axis is visible, when you like rotate and then sort the trials based on the color, you see that there is no particular proper trajectory of this like dotted and solid lines going. It's always everywhere. So since in the motion context color is irrelevant, similarly in the color context the motion goes everywhere, but color you can see nice. As the coherency of the color increases, the amplitude and the trajectories goes on one side versus other side, but the choice separations are always there. So you should just see how the solid and empty dots are here in different color versus motion context. So this shows how informative are the latent dynamics versus the raw recordings or some process recordings that you analyze. So I know this is little complex, but hope you got the concept of this latent variables. Any doubts here, or if you didn't understand anything here, let me know.
Deepak, what is dots on, dots off? That?
Okay, so this is basically just showing. Uh, these are just the average neural responses at each time point. Each dot shows a time point, and this is a starting point. But on and off dots are showing the choice here, choice left versus right.
So, does it mean like it's start of trial or something
Oh
like
yeah,
that?
yeah. Start of the trial is here. wherever
Okay.
the initial dot of each line starts, and the color of
Okay.
line represents the coherence value in the
Yeah.
motion or color. If it
Got it.
like the shades of blue represents color coherence, and shades of gray represents motion coherence. So basically
Okay.
this they're saying this three axes no are informative of task or uh, and this is done during the delay phase when they're not still executing the motion. Okay, only when the queue goes away they have to execute the motion. So basically they are saying that these latents are informative of the preparatory activity. So the preparatory activity is informative of the coherence levels in either motion or color. So basically this shows the shade shows the motion context strong or weak, and dotted the solid one shows to the choice one, and the empty one shows to the choice two. If you see this legend no, you can see here, right? Yeah. So that you a priori, because on a given trial what's the condition, right? So based on that they have uh, done this. So what they do here is, just to give a better understanding, they do principal component analysis and then pass it through a linear regression, to find which pieces can explain best about the motion, or which pieces can explain about the color. So based on that they got this dynamics. So now how you can use this is, so based on where the monkeys like once you get the test data, let's say some data you get one next trial, which you still don't have, but based on the current recording the point is here. So once you know the point is here, you can predict which direction the monkey makes a saccade to. So this can be used both as encoding as well as decoding. Encoding, that the amplitude of this trajectory informs about the coherence of motion or color, and the side of which side of choice axis it is shows the choice that the monkey is going to make. So yeah, so I hope this is clear and interesting. So there are many other dynamics that are possible. So and different dynamics have different names. So in the case of memory tasks, you tend to see many attractor dynamics. So when you try to hold something in memory, all the trajectories start at some point and come to one point when you're storing it. And so when you start here, all the trajectories goes here, all the neural trajectory goes and holds the memory here. And when it is unstable, you get different types of dynamics you get, which we will not go into now, right now, but yeah. So usually there is a thing called line attractor when you have different memory items that you want to hold. So this is just in one dimension, but you can have multiple attractor points. So depending on uh, what you're holding, like it's different. Like if you're trying to hold in your memory different alphabets, different alphabets have different attractor points. So usually attractor points are associated to memory or working memory from this recording. So there are different dynamics, and different dynamics have different names, and they inform different things. Okay, so another sorry, I didn't get chaos theory. For what?
So I was wondering, like, does the chaos theory come into place in this kind of?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So lot of this fluid dynamics and all, which are based on this chaos theory, can also be explained through this dynamical systems. So yeah, some scientists found out that even brain has a similar structure. So we can use this kind of modeling for brain and uh, get more mechanistic insights of how brain works, or uh, yeah, or what brain encodes and how we can use these trajectories for decoding as well. So these trajectories are used in this Neuralink and this also. So this Professor Krishna V. Shenoy is well known for it. So they make brain machine interfaces based on this dynamical systems theory, and there are more complex methods which can explain even complex behaviors. So for motor behavior, you just need a population average, but for attention or working memory, etc., you need some uh, method. Like for example, even in decision making, it's not just simple population activity. You have to reduce the dimensionality using some PCA and regression. So recently there are, because of this deep learning, right, we can get even very informative latents. So what happens is you have an encoder network, some deep network layer. So in this example, it's an image, or the numbers image or something, and you get a lower dimensional representation, and use that lower dimensional representation to regenerate the image that you show to this network. So basically you're trying to make these two ends similar and try to learn the weights of this network. So what it tells is, even with this low dimensional information, the whole you're able to reconstruct the whole data. So instead of using images, now you can use the neural data. So you give a spike trains here, try to generate the same spikes with some lower dimensional representation. So this can learn very complex features which you can't get through this linear dynamical systems or PCA, etc. So they just use this network, get this latents, and try to plot this latents in the three-dimensional plane. You get very informative features of it. So what is the use case of this? So you can also study how brains communicate and give rise to a behavior. So how is that possible? You have multiple recordings, but each recording has an underlying communication between two areas, right? So which you cannot see. They might not be synchronous in the recording level, but the latent variables can have synchronous activity. So if they are synchronous, or if they are in the same subspace, you see that they're communicating. So one example of a research is this motor planning and motor execution. So you can plan many things, but execute only few. So where are the other planned movements going? So there they found that the planning to action which is occurred are through a common subspace. So if the latents are aligned, you get a action as an output. But if the latent of preparatory and latent of the motion are not aligned, so the motion doesn't occur. So in one research they show, I'll share the paper, but it's interesting to see that you know how to learn how brain communicate with this kind of a framework as well. So for example, if you're seeing EEG, you can see at different bands some coherence happening when they communicate, but it's not always the case. There can be something underlying between two areas which are more coherent and resulting in some different activity. So in order to know how the brains are communicating, you can reduce to this latent dynamics and see how the latent dynamics are co-varying. So that is one use case. Other use case is this mapping between this lower dimensional and how informative they are of a behavior, or if you can decode a behavior based on which point of the latent space you're in. Okay. Also, you can use this to align information across participants. So each participant has different type of noise, right? Different type of neural noise. I have a different type of neural noise versus Athar. So I will generate a different data. Athar will generate a different data. But when you reduce a low dimensional space, you have the same structure, although the points might not be aligned. So then what you can do is, across participants you can try to align. If you see here, let's say a monkey is performing some task here, you get their this neural landscape of this trajectory for particular action, right? In this low dimensional plane. And for monkey 2 also you can get this way. So for two different choices you have two different trajectories, same for monkey 2. Now what you can do is you can use some method to align these two axes, so to make them coincide. So that way you can align across participants, and once you get the alignment vector, you can generalize for other participant also. Like let's say now Pradeep comes in, we can align this. We know the alignment vector between multiple participants, so now you can align for the other participants also based on that, or based on the some test data from Pradeep I can align this. So once I align on the test data, whenever you perform next action, we can predict what could be your goal or your action next. So for aligning across subject, across participants also we can use this kind of thing, because usually complex neural data, you can't get this simple latents to align properly. But if you reduce to hidden latents, then latents you can align. Aligning latents is easy because they are low dimensional and mostly have a structure in them. So I think that's it for today.